This is your first American interview ever, right?
Yes, that is correct.
There you go. So we're making history here, folks.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America Audio, with your host, Tim Binnall.
Hello out there, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with another edition of BOA Audio Season 3. It is February 17th, 2008, and we're coming at you a little bit later than usual. I want to apologize for that. It's just been a bit of a crazy week and weekend here at the BOA HQ. A lot of family drama on the home front. Never seems to end here for me, folks. I don't know what's going on, but we're here with a really, really cool edition of the show. Really promising episode. Very ambitious installment of BOA Audio. As many longtime listeners know, I love the international coverage. I love to talk about stuff going on around the world as far as esoterica goes, and I really wanted to challenge myself here as Season 3 picked up again in 2008 to find more and more international guests and cover areas that haven't been discussed anywhere else on any esoteric radio programs. And I'm happy to say that we're going to be doing that here this week, as we're going to call nearly 8,000 miles away to Cape Town, South Africa, for the first ever American interview by Cristo Louw, head of South Africa's UFO resource, known as SAUFOR. We are going to dig into the South African UFO field from top to bottom. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about key cases in South Africa, like a 1989 UFO shootdown over Botswana, plus just tons and tons and tons of amazing UFO stories from South Africa over the last century or so. We're also going to talk about famous South African contactees, the history of UFO studies in South Africa, how it compares and contrasts to American ufology. The big picture influences on the field are the same there as they are here. The government, the military, the media, how do they shape the UFO culture in South Africa? We're going to find out from someone who knows best, the head of the South African UFO resource, Cristo Louw, coming at us direct from Cape Town, South Africa. 7-hour difference on this one, my friends. Like I said, 8,000 miles. It was quite a mind-blowing episode to tape. Cristo was up in the morning. I was up about 1 o'clock in the morning, my time, trying to tape the interview. So I'm a little bit rough around the edges at certain points during the show because it was getting pretty late in the evening. And luckily for Cristo, it was early in the morning for him, but I was getting a little worn out. But needless to say, it is a tremendously educational edition of BOA Audio featuring tons of international UFO material that I'm willing to bet you've never heard before because, as I said, this is Cristo's first ever American interview. And we're going to be looking at ufology from a continent that is just way too often overlooked in the global UFO picture. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Cristo Louw, let me give you a little bit of background on him. Cristo Louw hails from Cape Town, South Africa. He has been interested in all things celestial since he was a child, and is one of the few South Africans who can legitimately claim to be a UFO expert. He is the country's only full-time dedicated UFO researcher and has the South African UFO Resource Organization, known as SAUFOR. He has spent the last 5 years compiling a database of key South African UFO cases and working with his group SAUFOR to raise awareness of the UFO issue to the South African people. His website is www.saufor.com, SAUFOR.com. Without any further ado, let's head on down to Cape Town, South Africa, and rock and roll. This interview was recorded on January 25th, 2008. Cristo Louw, talking about South African ufology on BOA Audio, Season 3. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very, very special edition of Binnall of America Audio. We are going all the way to South Africa, my friends. 7 hours difference. It's 8 in the morning down there. It's 1 a.m. here, but we're going to rock and roll. We're going to be delving into the South African UFO scene For many of the listeners here in America who are listening to the program, they probably barely know anything about the South African UFO scene. I didn't really know much until I started doing research for the interview, so I was really psyched to be able to track down Cristo Louw. He is South Africa's only dedicated UFO researcher and heads the South African UFO Resource, SAUFOR. You can find out more about the South African UFO Resource at www.saufor.com. Coming at us all the way from Cape Town, South Africa, Cristo Louw, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Tim, and all your listeners. I'm looking very much forward to sharing a bit of our point of view as we see it from down south in the continent of Africa.
Awesome. I can't wait. And, of course, this is your first American interview ever, right? Your first appearance ever on an American radio show or podcast or whatever, right?
Yes, that is correct.
There you go. So we're making history here, folks. We're breaking down boundaries. We're crossing continents. We're doing time zone differences. It's wild here, but I can't wait to dig in. Cristo, let's start out with, the thumbnail beginning, the bio, the background. Who is Cristo Louw? How did you find an interest in the UFO phenomenon? And while you're framing your background, give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on South Africa for the people here in the United States who maybe are a little xenophobic and don't know much beyond their own hometown or something. Tell us a little bit about South Africa. Tell us a little bit about Cristo Louw and how you gravitated towards the UFO subject.
Okay, where do I begin with South Africa's bio? Yes, it's a very, very mixed cultural background country. We've got 11 official languages in this country. Most people, if they think about South Africa, they would most probably relate it to a term called apartheid, which is something that was a political situation that led up until about 1993. And in 1994, a new president came in called Nelson Mandela. He was incarcerated in one of our most famous prisons for a very long period as a political prisoner. But when he became president, a lot of things changed. Something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came into being, and a lot of past issues came to the fore, and a lot more transparency in terms of the government became available and was focused on. Personally, I believe that South Africa is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I especially love Cape Town, the city where I'm staying at, and especially the mix of the people, the different cultural backgrounds, the different religions, points of views. It's just the most amazing place to discover yourself and to get a bit of a picture of possibly what the universe could be looking like out there with all the different possible extraterrestrial races and such other beings. Now, who am I? How did I get involved in the UFO scene? As far as I can remember, I've been a bit of a bookworm, and I was always reading books on the unexplained and the mysterious. We used to get these Reader's Digest compendiums of the unexplained, and I remember the first UFO information I came across was in books like that. And then when I was 12 years old, I read my first book where a lot of attention was given to UFO experiences and sightings in South Africa. This was written by an author called Cynthia Hind. She was a national coordinator for MUFON in Africa. And she has since passed on, but she has managed to write 2 books on the subject, and she also gave quite a few talks at international conferences, so she was quite well known. And I must just take my hat off for the pioneering work that she did. Then for me, I started talking about UFOs, after having read her book and, wondering why people aren't talking about this very, very interesting subject and all things related to it. And then as I started talking to people, I realized why people weren't talking. Because I'll tell you what happened, is that it would seem that most people have got quite a very strong opinion about UFOs, about extraterrestrials, about all these, fringe subjects although it's not something that they've necessarily researched for themselves, it's mostly opinions that are regurgitated, opinions that they picked up from someone else. And I figured, well, okay, if I'm going to want to talk about this, I'm going to most probably want to educate myself on this so that I can enlighten these people on what the actual situation is rather than the assumed regurgitated opinions. And so, I basically, I just, locked myself in my room for years and years and years, just trying to get as much information into my head. And in 1998, I had the opportunity to create a website, and I wanted to collect all the information on the internet that was available on UFO sightings and the likes. And since that time, because of the nature of websites, people found the website and they asked me how do they become a member of the organization. And so I didn't know what to tell them at the time, And since then I decided, well, look, this life is way too short. Time is just going past so quickly. If I'm going to be making the most of my time in this short lifetime, I'm going to want to be doing what is my passion in life. And I decided that this is my passion in life. And this is where we are now, 10 years later down the line, where we are registering SAUFOR as a non-profit organization in order so that we can collect information, disseminate it to those people that are interested, and educate the public as a whole.
Well, let's sort of like talk about SAUFOR for starters. What's your membership like? Do you have people like all over the country? You don't have to give me exact numbers, but I mean, how's it looking membership-wise? And talk a little bit about some of the events that you guys have had.
Okay, now basically, since the website that I had and, members from the public contacting me, there was also a situation where the media started showing interest in doing interviews. And because I put my personal contact information on my original website, there was free access for anybody to contact me. And since I've been doing radio interviews, a lot of people has been contacting me over the last good couple of years, I would say since about the year 2000. So it's been about 8 years now that people has been contacting me, and we've got members, about 600 people in South Africa.
Oh wow!
All different levels of membership. You get you're just your curious kind of person. It's just like wanting some information that they can't get anywhere else, and then you get people obviously who's had their own personal experiences. And then all the way up to, disclosure project kind of expert witnesses as well. Mm-hmm. And then we've also even got members in other countries as well. I've got a member in Russia. I've got in France.
Oh, wow, nice.
We've got in Brazil. So it's very, very interesting. Yes, I've never really formalized the actual membership as such. But now with the non-profit organization registration process going through, we're going to most probably want to do that at some point as well.
Nice. And you guys have like monthly meeting type events and probably like an annual thing, right?
Yes. We've been having monthly meetings for 4 years now here in Cape Town. And in August in 2005, we started meetings in Johannesburg as well. Which is very far from Cape Town. Mm-hmm. And we've had 3 annual events, which we've decided needs to fall on World UFO Day, which is the 2nd of July, as a commemoration of the Roswell incident. And, the first public indication we had that we were officially being lied to.
There you go, yeah.
A lot of attention has been focused on that, especially because most people in the public has at some point, heard about that event. Other kinds of events that we've organized are things like DVD screenings, like a movie club kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We do sky watch evenings where we would go out and just basically try and educate the people on the basic astronomy and things that are flying around at night, how to identify the different things, and then also, trying to possibly establish communication with the guys that are flying around.
Now let's talk about the history of the UFO phenomenon in South Africa, because I'm sure you're pretty well versed on that. I have some dates of major cases, but the dates I have start like in the 60s, and I'm sure you know more about what was going on with the UFO phenomenon in Africa prior to that. So I guess just talk about South Africa and the UFO, and how long does that history go back? Because in a lot of countries it seems to go back quite a ways. Maybe that's the case in South Africa. I don't know. That's why we have you here on the show, Chris. So let's find out what's the history of the UFO phenomenon in South Africa.
Yeah, let's get into the meat of the history. Tim, I just want to mention at this point that part of the reason why I'm doing this organization and keeping at it is because of the fact that, as you mentioned in the beginning, you don't know much about what's happening in South Africa. All the kinds of international books that we have access to in South Africa mostly talk about things that's happening in a lot in America and some other countries, but there's a distinct lack of information coming from South Africa, not because there's a lack of events. If I look back at the actual history, I can tell you that I don't know if you're aware of international waves of these, what they used to call airship sightings.
Yes.
Now, we also had a very similar wave in 1914. In the whole country, sightings of these things were seen, and there was literally not one flying machine man-made in South Africa at the time. There was not even one airstrip. Things that were seen were similar to, a normal airship, like a Zeppelin, a blimp, whatever you want to call it. A lot of them had very, very strong, very strong searchlights on them. And even in those days, some very laughable official explanations were given for these sightings. Here in Cape Town, when sightings occurred, people were reporting it from a town called Worcester, which is about 130 or so kilometers from Cape Town on the other side of a mountain range. And the official explanation was that there was a naval exercise going on in Simonstown, which is very close to Cape Town, and the lights were bouncing off the clouds, more than 100 kilometers. So that was very interesting and curious. And then another incident that happened in that time was a women's cricket match was played in Cape Town at a place called the Greenpoint Stadium. And this match was actually interrupted by one of these things hovering over them. So they actually cancelled the match, and everybody tried, they were frantic. They didn't know what it was. The army was called in, and they tried to shoot the thing down, luckily without success.
Oh, wow.
So, these kinds of things have been going on for quite a while. And as our research is ongoing, I'm sure that we will still uncover things, maybe using older language in some of the older newspaper reports and things like that. I can tell you each time I do an interview, I give my personal contact information out over the air or in a newspaper or magazine. There's always new people contacting me with stories going back a couple of decades. Then if we look at, the Project Blue Book era, that was, when South Africa was still under British rule. And as far as we can tell, Britain and America was working very closely together in collating international reports. And South Africa being under the British banner at the time, there was no difference in that. I've got a reference here of, 2 December 1957, where a Major R.V. Lamb of the South African Air Force Intelligence said the following: "We cannot deny the existence of unidentified objects in the sky. We have had reports of these things to which we can offer no answer." Now, that was in 1957. And, since Project Blue Book closed down in 1969, the whole situation changed in the public domain, where all of these kinds of official research projects, went underground. And so, where we are today, we're trying to piece together a puzzle to see what the actual picture was like. And then also, as our research has uncovered, there's been smaller public research groups that's always been at the scene trying to collect information and distribute it to interested people. Yes, I've basically got a list of about 10 or so such small groups that have existed at some point or another. And let me see what else I can tell you. Yes, and then you mentioned a couple of major cases as well, and I also try to focus quite a bit on that because there has been some pretty amazing experiences reported in South Africa.
Absolutely.
Besides the 1914 airship wave, there's a bit of a gap here, which I hope that we can still fill. But in 1947, we still had a few sightings as well. But I'm going to skip to 1951, where in a town also not too far from Cape Town, about 40 kilometers from Cape Town, called Paarl, there was an engineer who took his car out for a drive. One night, a test drive, he was working on the engine. And it was late at night, about 11:15 at night, very dark in the mountains. And he saw a figure standing next to the road and trying to get his attention. So he stopped and, he wanted to hear what this guy was on about. And he was asked for water. And he said, yes, he knows where a nearby stream was, and he took the guy to get some water. And they filled, they took an old oil can out of the boot of his car, or the trunk, you would say, I think. Mm-hmm. And they, cleaned it with some sand, and they put water in there, and they went back to the spot where he picked the guy up. And what he didn't see initially was that in a very shadowy area, there was actually a craft that was landed there. Huh. And this being, seeing the generosity of this engineer, invited him on board and, said he can ask any questions he wanted to. And the first thing he was interested in was to ask where they came from. And they just pointed up at the sky, not, giving any specific details. Mm-hmm. And then he was quite surprised by the lack of instrumentation and such inside of the craft. Basically, all he saw was one box-like unit, and there was a panel with 3 levers on it. And besides that, he didn't see any kind of other buttons or steering wheels or anything that we would imagine could be used as a steering mechanism for such a craft. And him being an engineer, being very fascinated by how such a thing would fly. And they told him that it works with some kind of a anti-gravity kind of situation, not going into too much detail. And, and then after a couple of questions, they politely said that they need to go, that their problem was, sorted out, and that they would one day come back. And that was the end of their meeting. And then he was quite surprised by the whole thing, as you can imagine. And the next morning drove to the spot, and he found actual landing marks, at the spot where it was. This case was thoroughly investigated by Cynthia Hind, I mentioned earlier, who was the national coordinator for MUFON. And then in 1972, we had quite a number of major things happening. There was an incident in a little town called Fort Beaufort, where multiple witnesses saw the same kind of thing. Police in a nearby town called Middelburg were the first witnesses. And basically what happened is this was over a period of 10 days to 14 days where the same object was seen in broad daylight. And on a farm called Breeside, the farmer one day actually called in the police because this thing just basically disturbed the animals on the farm and, the daily activities that need to take place. And, he couldn't get anything done. Yeah. And they actually suggested that they shoot at this thing. So they did shoot at this thing, and it was a very solid object. You could actually hear the reverberations of the bullets when it hit the thing. Mm-hmm. It changed colors just after they hit it, and it sort of made a bit of a wobble, went into the bushes, set some bushes alight, and then the thing just disappeared. Now, what was interesting about this case as well, from our research point of view, is that we've got an organization in South Africa called the CSIR, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Mm-hmm. Now, soil samples were taken and sent to the CSIR to try and, establish if there was anything out of the ordinary, because they could see where this thing landed at times.
Yeah.
And the soil samples actually disappeared en route to the CSIR.
Huh.
And that wasn't the first or the last time something like that happened.
Yeah.
So, what's happening in America, what's happening in other countries, is happening in South Africa as well. How it's being done, how it's being coordinated, we just don't know. Then in 1972 as well, in a little town called Rosemead, there was another multiple witness case with traces left on the 12th of November, about 160 kilometers from the previous town where the major incident happened at Fort Beaufort. This on-duty police officers were first initial witnesses. They saw a red light just taking off into the air from Rosemead. And then while they're still watching this object, they got a call from a principal of a primary school that was there. And this was a Sunday evening. And this principal was reporting very unusual damage to the tennis courts at the school that he saw. And they weren't too surprised because they were still watching this object, going into the atmosphere from that direction.
Yeah.
So they immediately investigated. And when they came to the scene, they saw very, very strange damage done to the tennis court and to nearby trees. The trees were scorched. There's also a report of a very huge rock that was no longer there. You could just see the hole that was left in the ground where this thing usually was. And why this is brought up is because it was actually a major headache for the principal, because lots of kids always played around this thing and actually got hurt because of it. And he didn't know what to do about it, and then this thing now all of a sudden just was gone. Now there's a lot of corroborating evidence supporting these reports. Lots of film footage has been taken, lots of photographs, police reports, and obviously quite a number of witnesses as well. Then in 1974, we move on to what I call the Bait Bridge incident. A couple was traveling actually from Zimbabwe, which is a neighboring country, to Durban, which is also a major city in South Africa, for a holiday. This happened on the 31st of May, and they traveled through the night, and they had two encounters with most probably the same spacecraft.
Yeah.
And they recall some details consciously, but they also to go for hypnosis, and where they recalled quite a number of other details as well. Some of the details recalled consciously was what happened was that the temperature of the car dropped dramatically while they were driving. And this was very strange. They couldn't figure it out. They just piled as much blankets and extra layers of clothes onto them as they could. And, as they got to one town, the temperature would normalize. Yeah. And they wanted to throw in petrol at the gas station, and it was actually quite hot out because it was that time of the year, and the area, it's not cold in that area at all. And the petrol attendant was looking at them in awe, being dressed so thickly, and looking so cold, but it's actually so hot. So and then they also noticed, as they wanted to fill up the petrol tank, that it didn't take much petrol. Not what it was supposed to for, the amount of kilometers they traveled. And this was, obviously an indication that something was amiss. Yeah. Then as they left that town, a similar thing happened. The temperature dropped again, and the radio gave some indication that there was some electromagnetic interference. And again, they don't recall much consciously, at that point. But when the investigation was done afterwards and they were regressed, by one of the top psychiatrists in South Africa at the time, specializing in that kind of regression technique, they found that the car was literally lifted off the road. Wow. And so this is why they didn't consume as much petrol as they were supposed to. Yeah. They even found that the tires that they put on just before their journey didn't show much wear at all. Yeah. You could still see the little, I don't know if the tires that you get there in America are the same, but we get little knobs on them when they're brand new.
Yeah.
And those knobs were basically still there, and those things go off very quickly when you're driving on a tar road.
Mm-hmm.
And then other details that came out in the hypnosis was that there was a being that appeared in the back seat of the car, and they were taken on board the spaceship, and they underwent some medical examinations and things like that. We don't even know the names of these individuals, but all the other details are quite readily available.
Now, how come you don't know the names? Is it just like a confidentiality type of thing?
Yeah, there's a major issue with, you don't know who you can tell, and there's a big stigma surrounding it, where I've found, like I mentioned earlier, when I do radio interviews, maybe a husband or a wife will contact me and they would tell me a story that happened 30 years ago, and it's something they don't even feel that they can tell their spouse.
Wow.
And to me, this is another added reason for me doing the work that I'm doing,
mm-hmm.
because, these things are real. There are things that are happening that are unexplained. We don't know why they're happening, and it's worthwhile asking the questions and doing the investigations.
Absolutely.
And, there's really no reason why people should react to the unknown with fear, although I know it is a natural human condition. But if we can learn to live without this natural fear reaction, it opens up a whole wider horizon for us to explore things that we don't currently understand. And isn't that supposed to be really what the pursuit of science is? I mean, we don't investigate things we already know, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. Now, the engineer and these people here who had the encounters, how did they describe the beings? Sort of the way that they've been described across the different countries, or anything different out of the norm or anything like that?
Yes, the engineer described the beings that he encountered as very, very human-like, maybe possibly towards a Mediterranean kind of a look. They had this kind of dark hair and more of a olivey kind of skin.
Mm-hmm.
And then the beings that described in the abduction event, that was like we would know as a typical kind of a gray description.
Yeah. So the same people that we think are doing the abductions here in America cut across the boundaries.
Yes.
I don't want to jump in here, so if you want to keep going with the
yes, I can go on for quite a while, but no, you please jump in. Yeah.
Well, let me throw a couple out that I have here, and then if there's some more that you think we should mention, I'll ask you at the end of the list I have here. I only have like 4 to ask you about, so.
Okay.
They're more recent anyway. What about this 1989 UFO shoot-down that apparently happened near Botswana? What's the story with that one?
One of my favorites. This is ongoing. This is open investigation still, Tim. As far as we can piece together, because obviously there's a very, very high level of secrecy surrounding this event.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the information comes from our friend and researcher in Britain, Tony Dodd.
Okay.
He was head of the Quest International, which is quite interesting because it looks like if you are in the country where a major event such as this happens, then you don't have access to the information. But if you're outside of the country, then you can get your hands on the information. But no, let me tell you basically how we see that event. 1989, I think it was the 7th of May. Yes, 7th of May. The first indication we had that our airspace was intruded, or was going to be intruded, was a ship called the Tafelberg, which picked up, the radar signals, and this was confirmed via airborne radar and land-based radar. 2 Mirage jets were sent to intercept this unknown target. As far as we can tell, we were also receiving confirmation from NORAD in America about this. And basically, visual contact was established by the squadron leader, whose name we do know. His name was his surname was Goosen. And he was instructed to shoot at this object, and on this plane was mounted an experimental maser cannon. Not a laser, a maser. Microwave amplification. I stimulated something emission. And he shot at this object once, and it disabled it. There was a flash or two flashes of light seen. The object lost control, and it crash landed about 40 kilometers in the Botswana side of the border. So it wasn't actually in South Africa this thing came down, which is another interesting point, because, you know, you can't just as one country go into another country and go pick us something up and bring it back. Yeah. Whatever it is. So, you know, there's a couple of interesting things that have come because of that. But what happened was the first, obviously the Mirages were first on the scene. They knew the location where this thing came down. They reported it back to whoever they reported it to, and helicopters were sent to secure the area on the ground and, you know, make sure that nobody else gets close, even though it's in the desert. They know that there's, you know, nomadic people living in the area. So they just wanted to make sure that, you know, it's a clean environment, as quickly as possible, retrieve this object and get it away. Yeah. Sadly, what happened was that the first helicopter that arrived on the scene wasn't aware of the electromagnetic field in the area, and it actually caused the instrumentation of the helicopter to malfunction, and this helicopter crashed, killing all 4 crew members on board. Oh, wow. So, you know, they had to quickly figure out a way to try and neutralize that electromagnetic field. As far as I can understand it, there was communication sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, trying to figure out, you know, how to deal with the situation, and something like a 70-page telex was sent describing how to deal with the situation. Oh, wow. Basically, how they neutralized that situation is there was some kind of a paint compound that they were told to use. I don't know the exact makeup of this. Possibly at some point in the future we can, you know, get information on what exactly this thing was, and see how credible that is. But they basically painted it on by hand, and this neutralized the electromagnetic field. They were able to get these big trucks in there. This object, by the way, had a diameter of about 10 meters, about 30 foot. So they were able to load it up onto one of these flatbed trucks, and in a military convoy move it to Pretoria, where most of our military headquarters are, and, you know, they do have places to hide things there. Yeah. As far as we can tell, it ended up at a military base called Valhalla Air Force Base, and from there, the American government was also very interested in actually acquiring this technology and the beings that was found. And it eventually ended up that we gave the stuff away to you guys, and in exchange for that, America would keep quiet at the UN about our nuclear testing that was taking place. And I wouldn't be surprised if actual nuclear components or actual weapons was also exchanged. So the level of secrecy is very, very high. And, you know, if this story comes out with names of people who actually made these kinds of decisions, you know, heads will roll, because this hasn't been that long ago. It's only 1989. And most of the people that were involved in this incident most probably still alive. And I've had quite a number of independent corroborations that an event actually did happen there. As you can imagine, there was quite a lot of people in the military at the time that are no longer in the military right now anymore. One guy wrote a letter to me saying that his job was to transport equipment from Pretoria to Angola at the time, which is where we had a war going. And one day, as he was driving, he passed a small convoy. There was 2 military vehicles at the back, and this huge flatbed truck in the middle, and then 2 military vehicles in the front, which he thought was unusual because he regularly saw convoys like this. Yeah. You know, transporting equipment, captured vehicles from the Angolans, which were most probably Russian-made, things that we wanted to study, you know. And this was odd because normally there was only one vehicle behind the truck and one vehicle in front. And so he paid a little bit more attention. And he could actually clearly see what was on the back of this truck because it was only covered by some kind of a tarpaulin. Yeah. And, it was classical, like we would call a saucer shape, two inverted saucers on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a very good look at it because it was going very slowly, and he passed them because he was going faster. And he was in a military vehicle, they were in military vehicles, so they didn't mind him, catching a glance at this thing. But he mentions that it was hanging over the flatbed truck on the left-hand side where it goes into the yellow lane. We drive on the left-hand side of the road, by the way.
Yeah.
I know you guys are on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
So now this thing was hanging over on the left-hand side, over the yellow line, and over the middle line on the right-hand side. And that's why they were going so slowly, because it was actually taking up a lot of road space at the time. And then I did a radio interview last year where a radar operator called in. Well, he was a radar operator at the time, and he confirmed that, they call it a bogey when they pick something up on a radar, that they don't know what it is. And he picked that up himself. He was one of the people that saw that. He still says that he doesn't know what that was, but he knows something was picked up on radar. 2 Mirage jets were scrambled to intercept this thing. This thing was brought down, and a major hush-up operation ensued after that. Everybody was just told to keep quiet about it, not giving any explanations.
Wow.
So, these little bits and pieces are all coming together.
Where did you get the information about the being and stuff like that in the ship? I presume there was someone in the ship, so
Yes.
Where did you get that kind of information? What do you know about that?
Yeah, the first information came from Tony Dodd. He was sent what was claimed to be official documents at the time by somebody who just copied the information from South African Air Force intelligence, who decided that this information is way too important for it not to come out. And there was a lot of major issues regarding the personality of this guy. They eventually met with him, and because of his unreliability, a lot of doubt was cast on this whole incident, even though independent corroboration has been made by Tony Dodd and his investigators, and by myself and quite a few other people as well. Mm-hmm. Now, those documents, those original documents that were sent, basically gave a whole breakdown of an autopsy that was done, the exact size of the craft, and something that you would imagine, a scientific study would show. It shows all the measurements, and the beings were also greys. They had 3 fingers. They had long claws at the end of the fingers. There were 3 beings found. Initially, what happened was this thing was not damaged beyond. You wouldn't notice that it was really, really damaged in the crash.
Yeah.
And they didn't know there were beings inside at the time when this craft was transported to the Valhalla Air Force Base. But when they reached there, they saw there was a little crack, and they tried to open that crack with hydraulic equipment, and two beings sort of came stumbling out. They were obviously injured, and the third one was deceased, was dead. And as far as I know, and this is typical of the South Africans, I suppose, and possibly everywhere else, it's when we gave the craft and the bodies to you guys, we only gave you 2 bodies. We didn't give you, we kept 1, and there has been independent corroboration of people who was contracted to assist the military in doing an autopsy on this being at one of our world famous hospitals in Cape Town called Grote Schuur. And the University of Cape Town was also involved in the microbiology department. And like I said, this case is still ongoing. And if possible, if you guys are interested, I can keep you guys up to date as to what we find.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated by this case already. I'm excited that there may still be a body in South Africa. I think the chances are better that we'll get our hands on that than any bodies that end up in America. Well, maybe
I certainly hope so. It's just that if we look at the situation from an objective point of view, I would imagine that the same kind of guys that are keeping a lid on it in America are the same people that's doing it here.
Yeah.
And they're following the same procedures. They've got access to the same funds and the same equipment and same specialists. So I wouldn't get my hopes up on that specifically, but I think at some point or another the truth does come out And as far as my personal opinion or understanding goes of, say, for instance, the Majestic 12 group or the E14 or whatever they're called nowadays, half of them, or at least half of them, want the public to know, at least the basic details as fact. And the other half are still clinging on to the old generation of, no, we can't let this out. People are going to want to look for scapegoats, and, I'm not going to, take the blame for this.
Yeah.
So they're just, leaving it for the next generation and, continuing to do that. But as the newer guys are replacing the older guys, they're coming in with a different worldview. And I've got a lot of hope that the information would come straight from these guys.
Let's hope so. I got two more little cases here. The aerial school case of 1994.
Yes, that was happened in Zimbabwe. Also investigated by Cynthia Hind very thoroughly. She dedicated 2 chapters in her book to that one specific case.
Oh, wow.
I'm not an expert on that case myself specifically. I've tried to focus my attention as far as possible on South Africa. But I can give you a bit of background on that if you like.
If you want to, if you feel comfortable, go for it.
Yeah, no, it's basically this happened at a primary school. And there was a cross-section of different cultures, and it wasn't just one. It just wasn't just white people, just black people, whatever the case may be. And what happened was this craft landed, communicated with the children while the adults, the teachers, were having their break and being inside the building, and all the children are playing outside. And they received telepathic communication. And these were also grey beings. And when the investigation was done, the children were all asked to draw pictures of what they saw, and the similarities of the pictures between all these children, something like 60 children were asked to draw what they saw.
Oh, wow!
And it was just amazing. As I said, mainly my focus is on South Africa, but as we get some help with the research, then obviously we will expand to neighboring countries and the rest of Africa as well.
Definitely. Well, let me ask you about what's going on kind of in the last year and a half or so down there, and that seems to be some crashes going on, some UFO crashes down there. I have one here for May of 2006 and one for the end of 2006, early 2007. So am I correct on those dates, and is there some kind of crash wave going on?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to actually know what's going on. The 2006 one, that was in a town called Port Shepstone, and that's something that crashed into the sea, very close to the shore. But for all intents and purposes, there was a smoke trail that was seen in the air for up to about 10 minutes afterwards, and also a lot of heat as this object, whatever it was, hit the water, and the surface was bubbling and everything. So from my point of view, I don't expect this to be anything other than either some space junk or a meteorite.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a thorough investigation done by our National Sea Rescue Institute because they received initial reports that an airplane might have gone down. So their job would be to try and find survivors or help survivors if there was such a thing. They didn't find any kind of debris, any kind of oil slick. They know exactly that they pinpoint, because of all the witnesses and the triangulation, they pinpointed the exact position, which was about 300 meters offshore, where this thing came down, and they sent divers down there, and there was nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever.
Strange.
And then the other incident you mentioned happened in a town called Lepalale. And I don't know too much about this. This was this went underground as quickly as it came to the surface. Also, because it's so far away, we don't have the resources yet to actually go and investigate everywhere when something happens, unfortunately. So hopefully we can get to a point like that. But as far as I remember, there was a municipality official who first publicly spoke about this. Her name was Leonie Russ, and there's no doubt of her credibility as a witness. And obviously she's not the only witness. So quite a lot of people saw a bright orange light come crashing down and it made a heck of a loud noise, like an explosion, and then the information just becomes muddled. We really don't know what that object was. The official explanation that was given afterwards to the public is that there was a power surge along the power lines that caused this glowing ball of plasma or whatever that traveled down the transmission lines.
Strange.
Yeah, no, so hopefully we can still, investigate that at some point. It's just a bit difficult being limited with resources now.
Yeah, and it seems like one of those cases where it just happened a year ago, so you're going to need to wait a little while before you get the kind of witnesses that are really key for that kind of thing, like retired military folks and stuff. And what about any other key or notable cases you want to mention? Anything you think that we left out that you think is, a hallmark of South African ufology that we didn't hit on?
Yes, there's been quite a few other ones. I'm just going to briefly touch on them, and I can also make a synopsis of it, maybe make it available for you to put on your website at some point. Let me see here. Yes, in 1975, in a town called Loxton, there was another landing that happened. Let me see the kind of trace evidence that was left on that spot. Nothing ever grew ever again up until this day. So that's quite another heavy one there. With physical evidence. And in 1978, there's a Groendal Nature Reserve near a town called Port Elizabeth, where 4 teenage boys went out hiking, and they saw a landed craft, and they saw silver-suited beings, which didn't walk like humans. They sort of floated more than they walked. Mm-hmm. And the terrain was quite inaccessible as well, where these beings were moving. And when they were moving uphill, instead of leaning forward like we would, if you can imagine just trying to walk uphill, you always lean a little bit forward.
Yeah.
And if it's extremely uphill, you lean a lot forward. Mm-hmm. Now, these guys were just walking at a 90-degree angle, or floating at a 90-degree angle uphill.
Weird.
And one of these guys was carrying a silver suitcase. It was very clear. All the descriptions are the same. And from personal information, I came across this case because I met a guy who was at school with these 4 teenagers at the time. And he told me that guys claiming to be from NASA came to them and, did a bit of an interview and did hypnosis on these 4 teenage boys. And after the hypnosis session, they would not talk about the event ever again. So I don't know what happened there. We do know this. It was investigated by the University of Port Elizabeth. A geology professor there brought some Geiger counters with, and they used experienced bush trackers who works on the nature reserve and knows the area very well to try and find the spot. And they did find the spot. They took measurements. There were symmetrical marks left there, and it was a really, really inaccessible bush terrain.
Yeah.
It's not something that somebody could quite easily hoax. Mm-hmm. And then to continue, we had another major case happen in 1979. We call this the Binnall case. A mom and her son took the dog for a walk one evening, and in the middle of the road there was this craft parked, and then the mom said to the boy, "Run back and go get your dad," and that's all they remember. And then they also went for hypnosis, and then basically they were invited on board, but they didn't want to really go on board. And there were some medical experiments done on them, and unfortunately a little boy also died in a car accident not long after that. And the mom also didn't really want to talk about it much more after that. Mm-hmm. Then we've got another crash similar to the Kalahari incident of 1989. In 1995 in Lesotho, which is a neighboring country inside of the borders of South Africa. Also very, very scant details. On the 15th of September, a farmer in the area basically notified the police that something was crashed on his farm, and all his grasslands were aflame. And he said to them, whatever it is, come and take it away. That's all he was worried about.
Yeah.
And so this went up the chain, got to our Air Force, and the rest we don't know anything about. And then in 1996, there's another major case where literally hundreds of police officers were involved. Very early hours of the morning, a very bright object was seen hovering, and over a distance of about 160 kilometers, this thing was tracked and traced and chased by police officers, even in a helicopter, and they took some video footage of the object, and the eventual explanation was that this thing was Venus, which doesn't really inspire much confidence in our police force if that is the case.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I also did receive some information which could possibly point to this not being an actual UFO but an IFO. I'm still trying to get corroboration of this, but it is quite possible that this was a top secret radar reflector device connected to a balloon. Which at the time they couldn't reveal because it was being used in secrecy at the time for national defense purposes, and that I do understand. But since then, if the information is not sensitive anymore, so it is able to come out. Like I say, I'm just trying to still get some written confirmation.
Yeah.
But it does fit all the details. And in 1998, in a town called Graaff-Reinet, 3 p.m. on the 27th of December, another UFO incident was captured on video. This time, multiple rounded triangular craft were seen, which seemed to move in a formation. While this group was performing aerial maneuvers, a much larger spherical object flew by, and the other objects seemed to follow it until the whole group disappeared behind the clouds. So as you can hear, we've got the whole range of things happening here as well.
Yeah.
And then I'd just like to touch briefly on a few of the personalities, people who's had ongoing contacts or has talked a bit about some information on an ongoing basis.
Oh, so you're saying like contactees in South Africa?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, let's hear it. That sounds fascinating.
The most famous contactee from South Africa is a woman called Elizabeth Clara. Her contacts began in 1956, and basically she wrote a book about her experiences called Beyond the Light Barrier. There's also quite a bit of information on her and her story on the internet. So if anybody wants to go check up on this, there's a lot of information that came from her, a lot of very interesting scientific information as well, on, as the title of her book indicates, Beyond the Light Barrier. When we do interviews as UFO researchers, and we always get this, kind of a left brain logical scientific question as to, how do they travel faster than the speed of light, because otherwise it just would take so long.
Yeah.
And obviously that's just a very limited way of looking at traveling through space and time. As we know, we can actually bend space and time, so that's not really a relevant question. But anyway, she also ended up working for the South African Air Force Intelligence, according to her own claims, to assist with the identification of unidentified flying objects. So I've not yet been able to independently corroborate this claim, but hopefully with the use of, we've got something similar to the Freedom of Information Act that you guys got there in America. We've got the Promotion of Access to Information Act here in South Africa, and I'm hoping to use that to establish, some of the details that she's claimed. And what I can add to this is that a lot of information was withheld out of her first book. She was told basically not to talk about this, and we're still waiting for this information to be released in a second book called The Gravity File. And we don't understand why this information is not coming out. It's quite a headache, actually. We want this information to come out because there's such a rarity of published books in South Africa on South African events. So we, as an organization, hopefully we can assist in the process of actually getting that book published.
And when you said she was told to hold the information back, was she told by the South African Air Force she worked for, or the beings, if you will?
The Department of Defense of South Africa, yeah.
Interesting.
As far as we can tell, the gravity file talks about, how the anti-gravity kind of propulsion systems work. And it mentions dates and places and names of people who don't want that kind of details revealed.
Yeah.
We gotta spread this stuff around. Let's put it on the internet.
You're listening to Binnall of America Audio.
Great heavens! What kind of radio show is this?
And then we've got do you know of the term Sangoma?
No.
No. Okay. Do you know the term witch doctor?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now, there is a fundamental difference between the two, but for our purposes, let's go with that. But I'm going to use the word Sangoma, and you can think of witch doctor, but, it's not in a negative connotation whatsoever.
Okay, yeah. It's like a good witch doctor.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Sangoma is very much a spiritual healer, a herbalist, and also a keeper of the traditions, a historian as such. Mm-hmm. And there's a very high Sangoma called a Sanusi, which there are only two of in the Zulu nation in South Africa. His name is Cristo Louw, who's talked about his personal experiences and also some of the knowledge that he was given as part of the initiations as becoming a Sangoma. And he was ostracized by most of his own people because of speaking about things he said he wasn't allowed to speak. But him, like a lot of other traditional leaders all around the world, knows that the times are changing, and that the kind of situation where you pass on very deep information from one person to the next, that time has basically passed, and the information now needs to be spread on a wide basis to everybody. He had an abduction experience himself, and during one of his initiations, part of it was also to eat part of the flesh of one of these grey beings, which has a kind of hallucinogenic effect, as we understand it.
Oh, wow.
Which is very, very interesting. Cristo Louw is also, as a Sanusi, he trains other Sangomas. He's trained more than 500 Sangomas himself.
Oh, wow.
And he's a very, very special person. He's also the keeper of some very old traditional ornaments and also a breastplate indicating the little grey beings, and also specifically, a saucer-shaped craft hanging off this very, very heavy bronze breastplate that he puts around his neck. And these things are, it's very, very clear. It's not ambiguous whatsoever. And this goes back in their history, since also they are aware of. They know that there are different beings interacting with Earth. They know that there are reptilian beings living inside the Earth. And David Icke especially came to South Africa to interview Cristo Louw, and they became, very good friends. And Cristo Louw has, from his traditional knowledge, confirmed a lot of the research that David Icke has done, which is also very interesting. And then Cristo Louw is also one of our best sources of information on crop circles in South Africa, believe it or not. And we do have those. He says that what is very interesting is that these formations do go back very far back in recorded history, in their recorded history of the Zulu nation. And they considered this as very sacred, and they would erect stones around these circles, and they would never go into that area. And they would know basically, long after the corn has gone and other things have grown there, the stones are still standing. And this has been quite a source of mystery in Africa, and most possibly in other parts of the world as well, where we find stone circles.
Yeah.
Just singular stones standing upright in a circular formation. And it's been quite a mystery as to the purpose of what that could be. And the way that Cristo Louw describes this makes a very plausible explanation. And he knows of such cases going back at least until the 1800s. But also, obviously, long before that, he's seen crop circles himself, and investigated them. And part of his job is basically to investigate mysteries, and he knows quite a lot of the Illuminati conspiracy, that the secret world government and New World Order, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He knows quite a lot about individuals who has come to Africa to promote that kind of agenda, through all the years. So people such as Cecil John Rhodes and the likes. He's had a very tough life. He's never been afraid really to speak his mind, and because of that, obviously, as you can imagine, there's lots of people who they would literally stone him if they could. And as far as we can tell, his son was actually murdered as well, most probably because of some of these things that he's been revealing.
Wow.
He's more famous outside of this country than he is here. Yeah,
I've heard of him through his work with David Icke, so yeah, definitely.
Yes. There's at least one more that I want to definitely mention.
Okay.
There was also a book written about this called The 12 Planets Speak. This is a contact that started in 1960 in the town called Durban, which is a coastal city here in South Africa. And we're going to use this the pseudonym for this contactee because he's never wanted any kind of attention and his real name used.
Okay.
I've made contact with him myself. I know who he is, and he's still alive, and the contacts are still going on. Basically, what happened, excuse me, in 1960, he was working at a furniture factory, and there was a position that was open up in the factory, and the guy who filled this position was somebody new. Nobody knew where he came from. Nobody knew him at all, and they became good friends as time went on. They went on, early morning fishing trips together, and they talked about all kinds of things, philosophy and whatever. But Edwin was a very simple guy. He didn't really care much about anything mysterious or whatever. Mm-hmm. He was just living his practical day-to-day life. And during a couple of the early morning fishing excursions, they would, look up at the sky, and at some point, his friend would just bring up the topic that, what does he think of life out there? And Edwin would say, yeah, well, it's way too big. It's most probably life out there. And then one morning, his friend said, well, look, what if I can prove it to you? And so, everyone was taken a little bit aback, and his friend took out a radio unit out of his bag and just adjusted a little bit, and they actually heard voices coming from this radio unit. And then he said, in about 10 minutes' time, look in that direction over the sea, and you'll see a light. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, they saw a light. This light came closer, came very close to them, and they could communicate through the radio. There was nothing special about this radio. In fact, it was an Earth radio. It wasn't from anywhere else. The only difference was that it didn't have any kind of a power source. It wasn't hooked up to the electricity or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was receiving its power straight from the communication from this craft. Eventually, Edwin was asked to become the representative of this confederation of 12 planets. They are very much human-looking, very much similar to us, and they claim to be coming from an antimatter universe. So it's kind of like the polar opposite of where, the kind of matter that we exist in.
Yeah.
If that makes any kind of sense to you.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but yeah.
Now, there's a lot of information, technical information, that they did make available. They gave him information to make available to people that are interested, and he was given this radio unit when his friend had to leave, which was after about 2 years of living here. Mm-hmm. And he was regularly communicated with. They've recorded audio tapes since that time, thousands of them. A lot of the tapes have disappeared. And like I said, the contacts are still ongoing, and it's a very, 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 very credible and interesting case.
Wow.
I think there is also some information on this on the internet. If people want to to find some information on this. The original document was called a message from Koldas, which is the planet where Edwin's friend comes from, specifically in the Confederation of 12 Planets.
How do you spell Koldas?
K-O-L.
Yep.
D for donkey, A-S for sugar.
Nice. Okay.
Koldas.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, these are fascinating stories. I didn't even know anything about the contactee history here in South Africa.
Yes. There's a few more, not too many, but there are a few, and I'm hoping, as we do our exposure in the media, that there is an organization such as SAUFOR in South Africa. We're hoping that more people will come forward with the stories.
Absolutely. Now, SAUFOR is sort of like the latest, I guess you could say, in the ufology history in South Africa. Talk a little bit about that history of people studying the UFO phenomenon. You said that you had like a list of 10 groups there. You don't have to go through all that, but just tell me sort of about the evolution of people having an interest in the UFO field in South Africa, and maybe compare and contrast it somewhat to what was going on in America, if you know about that kind of thing. What was the situation like in South Africa for people trying to get to the bottom of the UFO mystery throughout the 1900s and recently?
Yes, I would say about the time that NICAP was infiltrated by the CIA, about that time was when Elizabeth Claro had her contact experiences, and she was also basically given the task of trying to educate the public on the reality of extraterrestrials. By the way, her contacts came from our closest star companion, Alpha Centauri, to our solar system. And apparently there is some interaction on a regular basis with the people from that planet called Meton. And Elizabeth Claro then, did what she could, and she joined or started a group called Contact International. Mm-hmm. A lot of emphasis were put on more the metaphysical side of these kinds of contacts, and the philosophy, the spirituality, that kind of thing. And that has been, if I can maybe say, the flavor of the kind of research that has happened, mostly up until, I would say, about 1995 or so. Mm-hmm. From that point on, we had I do apologize. There has been a group called E14 who has been operating since about 1985, and MUFON also had a chapter here who conducted scientific, UFO research. Yeah. And investigating cases and making sure that the media, didn't distort the information. And the MUFON chapter that still exists in South Africa, they see their role mostly as a media watchdog. They don't actually do interviews. They leave that part up to me, which is quite an interesting relationship we've got going. I've always fostered the belief that the different groups need to do the research together and share the information, because it's no use reinventing the wheel. There's no ego involved here. We want to help the public to get access to information, and it's also not about telling people what to think or believe, but there are a lot of people who want to get their hands on the information. And how can you possibly form an informed opinion on something which you don't have access to the information? Yeah. So that is our mission, is to collect the information and distribute it. There has been a few other smaller groups, and not much documentation, unfortunately. So the most of the information I do have comes from people who's either been a member, or if they've had some kind of a small printed newsletter, then I would have some information on that. But that kind of research is still ongoing as to the actual history of UFO research in South Africa.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was sort of on the fringe a little bit, in the sense that if you don't really know the history that well, then it's not as well documented, I guess you could say, as the American history.
It's not well documented at all. I can mention a few now. Yeah, Elizabeth Claro was a pioneer, and then Cynthia Hind as well. because Cynthia Hind is the only person who's really published a lot of information. We also did have a very small little book called Let the People Know, who was written by a guy called Oliver Naggs in 1963. Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting. And he in his little book, he talks a lot about newspaper reports of the time, and him having a stack of these things and just randomly picking from his basket and then, publishing it in his book. Yeah. So there's still a lot of research needs to be done in the newspaper archives. There's been a bit of a blockage for me personally to be able to do that, because there's newspaper archives all over the country, and they don't have everything on a centralized computer system database, and they say that if you want to come and do the research, you need to come here.
Oh man!
So it's and I'm hoping to still get some help to do all of that. But our sightings database, basically we've got about 600 or so sightings on the database already, and it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Sounds like it. I guess to sort of move into some of the big picture elements that may be at play here in South African UFO scene, what's the role of the military like as far as the UFO phenomenon goes? Are they, kind of along the lines of the U.S. government, in that they do the investigations and then you don't get any information back from them?
Yes.
But how extensive is the military involvement in the UFOs, as far as you can tell?
We've had a bit of an interesting situation, and yes, I totally agree with you that the methods that are being used for dealing with situations as they are occurring, and also with leakages of information, that kind of thing, are very similar in America, here in South Africa. But there's been one major difference. Any kind of research that's been wanting to be done from the public and request made for information has basically just met on deaf ears. Yeah. That's how they deal with it here in South Africa. And they just hope that it goes away, and then it, eventually does. They don't feel like they need to answer the questions. Mm-hmm. And I find that very arrogant. And I will do what I can to reverse the situation. We are paying the salaries of these guys, and they are our servants, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way it should be. I can give you an example. We've got a very sensitive military installation here in Cape Town. Mm-hmm. I mentioned Simonstown earlier. It's very close to Simonstown, which is our naval headquarters. And this military base I'm referring to is called Silvermine Military Base. Now, there's a lot of things going on there, which most of the people in public don't know about. One of the departments that got there is called the Southern Air Command, and their sole duty is to monitor all air traffic and to give permission, for overflights in the Cape Town area. This, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of our most sensitive military installations. And what is very bothersome to me is that the American embassy, a new American embassy, was built a stone's throw away from this place, even though a perfectly well-maintained embassy was in Cape Town itself. Now, why this would happen now in the last 2 years, I don't know. But according to my information, there are underground tunnels connecting these two facilities through the mountains. And that, to me, is of grave concern. Why would one of our most secret national defense installations be on a constant basis be connected to the American embassy? It doesn't make any kind of sense to me.
Yeah, you said like they try to ignore it, like it'll go away. That's kind of how the American deals with the UFO situation now, for the most part. But does the military ever come out with regards to UFOs and make any sort of statements or anything to downplay this? Like you said, that thing about they said it was a military exercise and the light was bouncing off the clouds. Is that pretty much the extent of their role in dealing with the UFO phenomenon as far as the public is concerned?
No, basically what they would do additional to that is that if you do request information, they will send you information, things that have been reported in newspapers, but things that are very, it's not very credible information.
Yeah.
And then they will basically try to pacify you in that way. but they don't really feel like they need to officially say anything.
Yeah.
And I also once went together with another veteran UFO researcher here in Cape Town. Her name's Pam Puxley. She was one of Cynthia Hines' investigators for many, many years. And we together went to the Silver Mine base, and we requested information on, what do they do there. And they sent us away saying, no, you can't come in here, but you can go and speak to a public relations officer at the naval base in Simonstown. And then we had our second annual conference coming up. This was in just before 2006. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to find out from, the National Defence Force here in South Africa what the official policy was.
Yeah.
Or indeed anything. And so we went to this public relations officer, and he was very kind and listened to our story and didn't laugh more than we thought he would. And but he said, no, as far as he knows, there is no official policy on UFOs in South Africa. And then he offered to phone headquarters in Pretoria and just to confirm that, which he did, and we listened into the conversation, but obviously we only heard what he said, and we didn't hear what the other guy said on the other side.
Yeah.
But he apparently spoke to a general called Piet Retief, which is quite funny for our people here in South Africa, because that is a major historical figure going back in the politics of South Africa, very, very, very long back. Mm-hmm. But anyway, then basically the first thing that General Piet Retief asked him was, or let me say it this way, the question was posed to General Piet Retief, what is the official policy? And without answering the question, he asked the public relations officer, are you a member of their group? So I thought
your group?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So I thought that was quite revealing in itself.
Yeah.
And then they had some kind of a long major conversation, which, we only heard the one side of, and we were called, me and Pam Puxley, by this public relations officer, we were called walk-ins, which we had quite a chuckle about us, amongst ourselves. Mm-hmm. But obviously that's some kind of a military term that they use, for somebody out on the outside.
Yeah.
And then eventually General Piet Retief confirmed that no, there is no official policy on UFOs. And then I asked if I can get that in writing, and I was refused. Huh. So, another thing that I tried to do to get some kind of official confirmation is I got the address to write to the President's office of South Africa. And apparently, the track record of answering these letters are very good. Now, I wouldn't imagine that, the President Thabo Mbeki would answer it himself. He obviously can't do all of it. But his personal staff did. And I received a letter in 2 weeks' time saying, thank you for your request. It's being processed, and it's been referred to the Department of Environmental Affairs and Tourism without any explanation. Now, to this day, I don't know what that reasoning is behind that referral, because I'm asking here for official documentation on current or past research on UFOs or whatever else other term they would use. Mm-hmm. And now it's referred to the Department of Environmental Affairs and Tourism. And then sure enough, another 2 weeks go by, and I get a confirmation letter from the Department of Environmental Affairs and Tourism saying, thank you for your letter. It's now been referred to the Director General's office, Martinus van Schalkwyk. And that is where the trial ended. We made about 14 follow-up calls. We've got the dates and the times of these things, and the numbers are dialed. I published it as well. And, there was always just promises made that, it has been dealt with, and, haven't you received your letter yet? And, and nothing has come from it. That's where the trial ended, cul-de-sac.
Wow. That is strange.
So, I'm hoping to use a similar method and maybe get to like a public mass action, just to get like thousands of people just to write the same letter to the same people.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Hey, it's worth a shot. Now, what about the role of the media down there in South Africa? Now, I understand you guys have a pretty free-flowing media down there. It's a pretty, maybe I'm wrong, but.
It's a whole range of situations. I mean, we've got our tabloids, and we've got the daily press, and we've got our weekend press, and we've got the radio news and the television news, and but it is. I saw a bit of statistics the other day on this, and we are a little bit more free apparently than you guys in America with press. But I can tell you from my personal experience that when I started doing interviews, I would always basically just get funny calls from people phoning in and asking questions. They would ask things like, what did you drink? What did you smoke? Or that kind of thing. But that's to be expected. Well, and the other thing, obviously, is you're a Satanist, or that's evil, and you shouldn't talk about these things. And then I sort of eventually made peace with that and realized that if I don't get calls like that, then I've got reason to worry. But the media in general, I've been very impressed with. They're very objective mostly. Like all media in the world, they don't always report accurately. They fill in the gaps with imaginary details. So that has sort of disparaged other UFO researchers in the past in South Africa to deal with the media whatsoever. Yeah. And this is where I most probably have got a bit of an upper hand in the eye of the public, especially with doing the kind of research and people not really knowing about anybody else, is that I have not been afraid to do interviews. Mm-hmm. If people contact me, I do the interviews. I've been on television as well 4 times now. And the kind of feedback is very, very positive. I found that I think this depends a lot on your own individual personality as well. How much are you approaching this subject with fear, with skepticism, or with paranoia? The more paranoia you are, how shall I say, exuding, the more you are attracting. Yeah. And I don't focus on any negative aspects whatsoever. I basically just want to make information available so people can make up their own damn minds. And that's very positive. Just found that the kind of responses in general, obviously there's been a few, different cases, but in general, the media's interest has improved tremendously. And it's very much open reporting. One of the projects we're working on at the moment is to construct our own UFO monitoring stations. And one of the biggest newspapers in South Africa is covering it quite openly.
Here in America, we kind of have what we call like the giggle factor, which is sort of like just how when the media covers the UFO stories, it always puts it at the end of the news broadcast and sort of ties in like a little joke at the end. There's a major news story. On occasion, a UFO story will break into the mainstream news here in the U.S., and then, like I said, it'll be at the end of the news, and they'll kind of like laugh about it, and that'll sort of be it. Is the situation better in South Africa in that regard, or is there still that sort of ridicule surrounding the subject as far as the media goes?
It's actually a wide range. We do get a little bit of all the situations, but mostly the reporters are quite independent and they do their own thing. They're not too limited in having to toe the party line. Yeah. But depending on the personality and most probably their editor. Mm-hmm. If they want to put a kind of a funny slant at the end, then yes, that does happen quite often.
And sort of the last, I guess you could say, tenet of big picture analysis here. What about the general public down there in South Africa? You kind of said that they're sort of rigid, I guess you could say, in their belief system as far as UFOs, pro, con, or all the range, I guess you could say. But what would you say the attitude of the general public is in South Africa with regards to the UFO phenomenon?
I've been pleasantly surprised. The situation is mostly where people just can't imagine that there isn't life out there in this amazingly vast universe, and we are the only intelligent life. Just most people would actually like to actually get their hands on something physical as evidence, mm-hmm. Or actually meet a being or something like that. And I always sort of try and get people to think about it a little bit differently. I would use examples of things that not everybody experience themselves on a personal level, but everybody knows that it's possible. Things like, this is a bit of a crude example, but you get the situation where people are raped, and not everybody undergoes that experience, but we know that it happens. And the similar kind of thing with the UFOs and extraterrestrials. Now, most people are quite open to know that there are things that are happening every day that we just don't know anything about. The most common kind of feedback that I get from the average guy on the street is that, why should I care?
Yeah.
What difference does this make in my life? Because a lot of the people are survival-based mentality. Where's my next meal coming from? That kind of thing. So, I've also looked a bit at the psychology from Abraham Maslow, where he's got that pyramid of the hierarchy of human needs. And if you sort of understand that pyramid, you see the bottom rung of the human need is the survival issues. And if your mind is occupied on that constantly, you don't have time to think about the things that go up the pyramid, right at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. And, if you can create a situation where people can spend a bit more time on, who am I? Where do I come from? How do I fit into the bigger picture? There are quite a few people in that situation, and it's very, very easy to talk to them about the subject. For them, it's very natural. But for the survival based mentality, they just, why should I care? That's their attitude.
And then just to sort of throw back to the media here in the States, here in the U.S., we have kind of like a paranormal boom going on as far as the Discovery Channel type shows and that sort of thing. Is there anything like that down there, programs centered around the paranormal, or is it not breaking through yet there?
We don't have as big an industry of creating our own programs, besides soap operas in South Africa. We're hoping that we can still, create more documentaries. And in fact, that's one of our projects as well, is to actually create our own documentaries. We want to do one on each major case, and also then obviously international news and important information that can help people to make up their own informed opinions. But we've got lots of programs and lots of interest in paranormal series and movies. Movies like Independence Day and Signs, Mel Gibson, that kind of thing always are one of the best, or they always go on top of the best viewed or attended movies that are shown. And the X-Files was a very, very popular series here in South Africa. And then also now, people are quite taken to people who have special abilities, like series like this Heroes. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, yeah.
And 4400, that kind of thing. And then also another series called Invasion. It's been very, very popular down here in South Africa.
And just now we're jumping back into the general public. Sorry about jumping back and forth. What's the attitude for the general public, and I guess for you folks in the UFO community, with regards to the American influence on UFO studies down there in South Africa? Like, you already told me about this Botswana thing with the crash and everything, and how the Americans ended up with the craft and 2 out of 3 of the bodies. And there's a lot of, in other parts of the world, there's sort of a tinge of, distrust about the Americans with regards to UFOs. Seems like the U.S. has all the good stuff. And maybe, maybe the ones who are kind of behind any sort of cover up that may be worldwide. Maybe it seems like they're at the crux of the whole issue. But what's your perspective as a South African on that attitude? Is it something that the people down there feel and think, or is it something that maybe we just think here in America that you guys resent us because of the central nature of the UFO phenomenon here?
Yes, Tim. In general, it's a bit difficult to answer that. I can sort of give you a few of my own personal viewpoints, but in general, we don't really talk about any kind of American influence. Like I say, most of the people here are survival-based mentality, and they basically just focus on what's happening today.
Yeah.
They don't really care too much about what's happening in America, besides if it's affecting maybe the oil price, things like that, because that literally affects everything in the economy. But regarding specifically the UFO issue, no, we don't see the Americans as controlling much or being ahead in any way. We know that the controlling situation is an international thing, because we do a lot of, always when we're getting reports from America, we're also getting reports from other countries at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting way of looking at things.
So it's not sort of like the situation where, you get a good UFO case and then you're like, well, we better look into it as fast as we can because the Americans are going to come along and sweep this under the rug, kind of like what they did with Botswana or whatever. It's not that sort of situation.
No. We've, like, for instance, the thing that happened at the Chicago airport, that spread on our internet news websites very, very fast. And, it was broadcast on CNN as well, if I remember correctly. And, a lot of people, got their hands on that information. But it's not a situation where, the people actually care much. If something happens on their back door, then, then that will sort of, get them to jump up and down. But, the general attitude is one of possibly more being entertained by the subject, rather than wanting to actively get involved and dig in deeper. There's quite a lot of individuals, maybe freelance journalists, who would be curious and would dig deeper, but they always find that they can get to a certain point and no further than that. So a lot of people lose courage down the line very quickly.
And what about some of the other countries? Now, I know you focus on South Africa, so this is sort of a basic question, but what about some of these other countries that are your neighboring nations, like Namibia? We talked about Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Swaziland. Do these countries have their own ufology communities and their own ufology subcultures and that kind of thing, like America, like South Africa, like these other countries? Are they players as far as researching UFOs go too?
No, not as far as I know. As far as I know, South Africa is the most active on this continent regarding the actual research into UFOs and related issues. There has been certain individuals that has contacted me over the last few years, but no centralized research organizations whatsoever. I know the Southwest Africa, the Namibia situation is quite interesting, especially for me personally, because there's a lot of Nazi German influence from during and after the Second World War. So I don't know if that has any role to play with things not really, coming out in the public where we are now. But there has been very interesting cases coming out from neighboring countries, especially such as Namibia and also Zimbabwe, where Cynthia Hein did a lot of research. But we find that the reason why South Africa is more active in this regard is because our information flow is more accessible. The rest of the countries in Africa are closer to more the third world situation, rather than a developing country such as South Africa. Yeah. Where we've got a lot more electronic media, computers and televisions in the houses and things like that.
I don't know if you're familiar with some of these ancient astronaut theories that have gone around for a while, and it sort of suggests that the original inhabitants of Earth came to, from outside Earth. There are ETs or whatever, and they genetically engineered humans to mine gold. And I could have sworn that a lot of this sort of originated in South Africa. Do you know anything about that?
Yes. A local author called Michael Tellinger actually wrote a book called The Slave Species of God. He himself grew up in a gold mining community. So his whole life, was pivoting around this whole gold issue and the obsession that people have with this mineral. And when he came upon Zecharia Sitchin's work, with the Sumerian clay tablets and the Anunnaki and, the slave species actually created to work in the mines to mine this for the extraterrestrials, things just started to make a lot more sense for him. Yeah. And he actually wrote this whole book on this subject. It's something that's very, very interesting, very plausible. I had a very interesting discussion last night as well with a few friends, and I asked the question: give me a good definition of what it means to be human. I've yet to hear a good definition of what that means.
Yeah.
Now, why I say this is because I do consider the possibility that our genetics do come from various sources. And depending on who you speak to, that can be up to maybe more than 22 different genetic sources. And this would explain some of the ancient tribal knowledge, such as the Dogon tribe in a country called Mali in Africa, where they've got detailed information about Sirius and its white dwarf companion, which you can't see with telescopes. How does a tribal group of people know about details such as that? And then obviously, ancient Egypt, and the Aborigines in Australia, the Native Americans, North America, the Bushmen here in South Africa. Very, very ancient peoples. And as far as I can understand it, they know that they themselves do not come from this planet. The Zulu nation here in South Africa, as well as I mentioned earlier with Credo Mutwa, apparently the name Zulu means from the sky.
Huh.
And not many of the people now walking on the streets today, more westernized, actually know that.
Yeah.
But the historians of their own culture know that in no uncertain terms.
Interesting. And I opened up the interview here to some of the people who write for my website. That they sent me. Only one person got back to me in time because of time issues. But here's what she had a question for you, and I'm gonna roll it out for you if you don't mind.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, cool. And it's Rochelle Hawks. She writes the column Medusa's Ladder every Friday at BinnallofAmerica.com. And here's her question. It's about racial issues within ufology and the white majority of ufologists. I'm not sure if that's in South Africa, or I know that's the case here in America. So maybe that's part one, I guess. And she says her theory has to do with the lack of recent tribal-type magic/myths. I'm not sure if she means America or South Africa there or not. I guess about the racial issues within ufology, if there are, what the racial breakdown sort of is in South Africa for UFO studies, and how the politics of race and place may have influenced your experience or your views, or your way of doing research or anything like that.
Yes. Okay. So if I understand correctly, I'm just going to repeat. The question is regarding if there's been any influence in the way that UFO research has been conducted in South Africa regarding any racial issues.
Yeah.
And I would categorically say no. There's been no such interference whatsoever, or such perspective coloring. What I can say is that currently, looking at the people that I know about doing research, it's mostly also white male, but I do also know of females as well. And then I do have members, who are not white-skinned. I've got members of all different kinds of cultures and also cultural backgrounds in my organization, but they are not necessarily researchers. I've got I know an Indian of Indian background of the country India. Mm-hmm. He's a researcher himself, and then I've also heard of another country in Africa. I think in Kenya. There's been a professor at the university, a black professor who was a UFO researcher quite many years ago. Huh. But yeah, that's an interesting point that she brought up. Mostly it is a white male kind of attractive force to become a UFO researcher, and why that would be something I must most probably still look into in the future.
Yeah, it's a subject that's come up a couple times here on this show.
Have you guys come to any kind of conclusions?
No, we're just kind of scratching the surface on it, and that you first got to, I guess, shine the light on the issue first, and raise the issue, and then we'll figure out what the story is. But it's pretty interesting in that regard.
Yes.
And sort of like the last big picture thing to close the book, I guess you could say, on the UFO discussion. What are your big picture thoughts on UFOs? What do you think it's all about? What does it mean? What are they doing here? Based on all the stuff you looked at, of course, you don't have a definitive answer. Nobody has a definitive answer. But you know, what's your theory? I guess you could say on what we're experiencing here on Earth, looking up in the sky and seeing these things, and down there in South Africa, seeing them come down to the ground and land and crash and all kinds of other crazy stuff.
Yes. My personal perspective on the whole issue as to why this is happening, what our part in this whole thing is based on the fact that you can see from the research that has been done internationally that there's literally no part in our recorded history where these things have not been seen. They've always been here. So for all practical intents and purposes, we are most probably part of them. It's not as if there's a difference. I would see us as part of a larger intergalactic community. Mm-hmm. It's maybe just a situation where we find that we are still adolescents. We are still very young. And we are now maybe going through a process, a transformative process, to become more active members in a larger cosmic family. And I do feel that we have been guided at some points. We have been interfered with from some people's perspectives. I choose not to look at it like that. But yes, I've got a lot of hope and a lot of positive feelings to what's going to be happening in the future. And I think also I want to add that these guys are not here to save us from anything. As far as I understand the messages, we are responsible for our own salvation, if you want to look at it from that point of view. And then once, they are here to help us to help ourselves. And they are not here to do anything on our behalf, unless it is something major like a third world war. As far as I understand it, they do have the capability of neutralizing any kind of a nuclear weapon, even before it, leaves the ground. Mm-hmm. And they know where these things are stored, and they know where these things are in satellites around the Earth and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't have any kind of phobia about a third world war breaking out. I feel that this planet is a jewel in the cosmos. It's got a lot of diversity of life forms, and based on our own civilization and all the variety of things that we exist with side by side, we are very interesting to their point of view. The way that we are doing things, and I would most probably look at Earth as some kind of experimental planet because of all the different influences. Nobody really knows what's going to happen in the future. Yeah. Even though some of these guys, can travel through time and can see what's going to happen in the future. Most of the information that I find most credible, the guys say that, look, when you make a choice, that affects what's going to happen to the future, and we make choices every moment. And the choices we choose to make is at the end of the day where we're going to be headed. Yeah. So I think it's at the end of the day more important for us to take personal responsibility and get this planet back to a level which is not as polluted as it is now. And we should actually help our children to become the best they can be as individuals, rather than brainwashed, sheep.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. Now, you say you're excited about the future. Do you think, you're a young guy, you're 32, I'm 29, do you think you and me are going to see disclosure in our lifetime? Just UFO disclosure, of course, not something else.
Yes, I understand. I don't know. It's a catch-22. I mentioned earlier that I think that the control groups who are keeping this the lid on the information, or at least mostly keeping a lid on the information, because obviously they have let some information come out. But I think that as the newer generations are taking the positions of these top decision makers in these control groups, it is possible that it will come out directly from them. But I think that it's most likely going to happen more from a grassroots level, from people like you and me standing together and demanding that our leaders take responsibility and reveal the information. Because at the end of the day, our very hard-earned tax monies are paying for their salaries and all this research to take place. And we should see the benefits, especially regarding technologies, alternative technologies to generate energy that are non-pollutant, the anti-gravity kind of propulsion systems, that kind of thing. And also other technologies which will help us to be more free as individuals instead of being dependent on systems, such as the banking systems and all the problems we have with credit and people not really knowing how to deal with that kind of thing, and stop enslaving people's minds. Let people be free. I think that's my final word.
There you go. That's perfect. You already kind of talked about you get the documentary things you want to work on and stuff like that. What's next for you guys at SAUFOR? What's next for Cristo Louw and the South African UFO resource?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we basically in the process of registering as a non-profit organization. SAUFOR has been mostly a one-man show up until now. And so, with the troops coming in, hopefully we can get a lot done in a very short space of time. We're going to be obviously continuing with our annual conferences, which will be coming up in July again this year. And we will be building our own UFO monitoring stations. And that information will help us a great deal in our research, and then obviously to identify hotspots where we can go out and attempt to make contact with the guys that are here. And then also a major focus of what we're doing is public education. So I myself and a few other people will do public talks as often as we can, and continue with the media interviews just to get the people on the street to know more of the important issues surrounding the UFO subject, and then also obviously the control which most of us are experiencing but are unaware of.
Yeah.
So I find that through UFOs we have an avenue to reach people who otherwise don't feel like they fit into any other kind of system or society or group, which is very interesting, because we do get people from all kinds of backgrounds, and most of them feel like they can belong to a group such as SAUFOR because they really don't fit in anywhere else.
Yeah.
And basically what we can do is to by focusing on our own personal development as individuals, we can also in that way get people together as a group to assist the planet as a whole, and then also help communities with basic skills development programs, and get people out of this survival mentality mode so that they can focus more on self-actualization issues.
Absolutely. How about a trip to America anytime soon for you, Cristo?
Oh, that will be fantastic. My full-time research has been totally unfunded, and so I'm a major part of our non-profit organization will be to focus on funding for our different projects, and then hopefully also to obviously get to America. I do have a friend who visits the International UFO Congress in Laughlin, Nevada, every year, and then she brings a lot of information back to us. So which is fantastic. But I'm hoping to be in a position to possibly be a speaker at next year's conference there.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Those there's an expression up here in America. They need to get off the schneid and bring you up here to America. Absolutely.
That will be fantastic.
Well, Cristo, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. We've done 2 hours here, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface, and it's amazing. Folks, we've been saying it year in and year out on the show here. Ufology, it's not an American phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And you just listened to 2 hours worth of proof of that from Cristo Louw. Just a tremendous education for me. I learned so much here, and I'm really looking forward to the feedback we're going to get from the BOA audio listeners when they hear this episode. I'm psyched to have had the chance to talk to you and have your first American interview be on Binnall of America Audio. I feel great that we've established a beachhead here in South Africa for BOA. If you ever want to get in touch with me, if there's ever a breaking story in South Africa, definitely shoot me a line. We'll bring you right back on the program. I have a feeling that this is going to be a back-and-forth communique for quite a while between the BOA crew and SAUFOR, and I'm looking forward to that. Of course, the website is SAUFOR.com, SAUFOR.com. Cristo, thank you so much again for coming on the show, and I look forward to future adventures for us.
Thank you, Tim, as well. I think the work that you're doing is fantastic, and I'm very glad to see that us younger generation guys are also much more in the mood for working together than trying to shoot each other down and things like that, which some of the older guys have done. And I think that collaborating our research efforts, we will be able to get closer to the answers we are all searching for, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. And thank you very much to your listeners, and we're looking very much forward to keeping in touch in the long term.
That does it for this week's edition of BOA Audio, Season 3. Big thanks to Cristo Louw for coming on the show, giving us so much of his time and working around the time difference schedule-wise to make the appearance here on BOA Audio. Of course, you can find out more information on Cristo Louw at his website, www.saufor.com, SAUFOR.com. We're going to try and keep it short and sweet because we're already way up against the deadline here for when the show should be posted. So we're going to skip BOA teasers on some of the new stuff that's coming up. We're also going to skip the listener feedback. Those things will be back next week, I presume, hopefully, as long as my schedule is a little more free. Instead, we'll just roll right into the thanks part of the show. Thanks, of course, to the fantastic BOA staff, Leslie, Chiron, Arlie, Joe V, Tina Senna, and Rochelle Hawks. Week in, week out, top-notch reading material at Binnall of America. We just posted a new piece from Rochelle talking about the Mormon Bigfoot connection. In this past week's Gray Matters, Leslie talked about that prickly word, believe. What is believing in something? What is not believing in something? Is belief, knowing, all that great stuff. Very heady edition of Gray Matters this past week. Chiron talked about the rise of the machines, robots, and his latest fascination with them. And Regan Lee talked about the Stephenville UFO sightings and the trickster element to the Stephenville UFO sightings. So 4 amazing columns posted at BOA this past week. Definitely want to check those out at the website. As we say, week in, week out here on the program, if you're only listening to BOA Audio and you're not reading the columns at Binnall of America, you're only getting half the story. The episode you just heard, my friends, 2-hour call to South Africa, that costs a lot of money, trust me. How can you help us pay for a phone call like that? Simple. You make a donation via PayPal at BOA. Go to Binnall of America. You'll see the PayPal button. Click that. It'll take you to the PayPal page. All donations go towards keeping BOA Audio and Binnall of America up and running and freely available for all of our great listeners and readers the world over. Next week on the program, we're going to have a very neat edition of the show. My friend Chris Balzano actually lives pretty close to me. We're going from 8,000 miles away to half-mile away. Chris Balzano will be coming to the program to talk about his recently released debut book, Dark Woods, Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in Freetown State Forest. We're going to be talking about the unique setting that is the Freetown State Forest, which Balzano says lies at the heart of the infamous Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. We'll find out about the colonial origins of Freetown and some of the modern-day oddities outside of the normal esoteric genres that we talk about here on BOA Audio that have been reported to emanate from the Freetown State Forest, including zombies, an amazing witch story, and the very strange Pukwudgie creatures that are sort of like trolls but have been around apparently in the area for many, many years. Very fascinating stuff with regards to the Pukwudgies. We're also going to take a little dive into true crime as we talk about the cult activity that plagued the area in the late 1980s. What is this cult activity all about, and some of the infamous cases in the area from that time. It's definitely a fascinating interview that goes off the beaten path of our usual esoteric discussion here on the show to cover areas that are oftentimes marginalized by the bigger esoteric genres. That's next week on the show. Chris Balzano talking about Dark Woods, Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in Freetown State Forest. And on that note, my friends, we're going to call it a week and try and wrap up the episode here and get it out to you in time. Thank you so much for your patience. I apologize for being so late coming at you this week. I'm hoping we can get back on track next week and have things rolling out on a fairly steady pace from here on out. Until you hear from me next week, this is Tim Binnall, thanking you for listening and signing off.